Well, as we've just seen announced on Twitter, FM25 has been delayed. It's now not expected to be released until the end of November rather than early November. And not only that, they've removed even more features, including international management, which, let's face it, none of us are really going to miss. But this is a pretty significant development update. We need to have a little bit of a read. And here we have said development update. As I said, it was mentioned on Twitter, and this is straight off of their webpage. And I guess we'll have a read through and react to this as we go. I've skim read it so far, but there might be that there's some details I've not already been able to pick out. So it's from the keyboard of Miles himself. Let's get reading. I want to begin this latest this is not a Miles impression, by the way. I want to begin this latest Football Manager 25 development update by thanking everyone who read our previous one in June. I made a video on that. You could go and watch that if you wanted to know what was happening in June rather than what's happening in September. We've been following the reaction and conversation and look forward to addressing many of your comments and observations when we start our FM25 gameplay rollout period. In June's blog, I revealed the first ever FIFA E World Cup of Football Manager, which wrapped up this past weekend, and it was a jolly good time. If you haven't watched any of the coverage, you should go and watch it. I'm all over that coverage, and I had a great week up in Liverpool. It was awesome. I was very proud to be in Liverpool with the final couple of days of a fantastic 4-day competition that I thought FIFA E did a fantastic job with, from production, the players, the broadcasting, and all the content across socials. Everything looked incredible in person and online. It genuinely was incredible. Seeing FM in the esports domain was really exciting, and I hope those who attended the event and those who watched and followed along online agree. I do agree, Miles. It was brilliant. For me, it was pretty surreal and emotional to be sat in the audience and hear the way the presenters was I a presenter or a pundit? Maybe a pundit. And pundits spoke about the life's work of the entire SI team and the way what is primarily played as a solo experience came to life as an esport. I think that sentence makes sense. Alongside the FIFA E team, we'll digest and evaluate the tournament in the coming weeks to see what learnings we can take from and what the future entails for collaboration between us. Hopefully, lots more tournaments that I can be a part of, because I had a lovely time. Congratulations to the winners. I struggled saying these names all week. Iksan Ramat Taufik and Buddy Mohammed Manar from Indonesia. What an achievement. Agreed, Miles. Commiserations too to the runners-up Sven Golly and Terry Wennett from Germany, who were fantastic throughout the event. The standard of play from all 20 managers was incredibly high. I mean, yeah, blah, 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 blah. Can we get into the FM25 stuff, Miles? Come on. This is the bit. Revising our timelines. This is what I feared. This is what I feared quite a lot. Not just because if it delays too far, I'm going to be bankrupt. Because I make most of my, I would say I make about half my money for the year between October and December, when we have that perfect storm of new game and high ad rates here on YouTube. If the game's not out till the end of November, ad rates drop on Christmas Day and stay dropped for quite a significant while afterwards. And I'm not worried. You're worried. It's fine. Does anyone want to buy some Avengers Lego? Oh, my word. We previously stated we'd be confirming FM25's release date at the beginning of September. That's now, with pre-orders starting at the same time, closely followed by our gameplay rollout period. Firstly, we've had to shift the initial announcement of FM25 to the end of September. At least that means I'm not going to be doing reaction videos from Disneyland this year, because I'm off there next week, so can I cancel that trip? I need the money. The gameplay focus period will follow soon thereafter. Our target launch date has moved accordingly and is now scheduled for late November rather than our usual early November slot. So I guess early access / beta mid-November, if we get the 2-week early access period that we normally get. That's very late. That is very, very late. The FM25 development cycle has been challenging for the whole team. We knew that moving the entire game to the Unity engine was going to be a complex endeavour. As we've gotten deeper into the process and gained learnings, it's fair to say it's been trickier than we originally anticipated. The entire dev team has been challenged in a myriad of new ways and are doing an incredible job in the process. I'm excited to eventually share our hard work with you, but we need a little more time before we can do that. On one hand, I appreciate their being very open and transparent about it. On the other hand, goodness me, am I terrified reading that sentence, because delayed games often, how do I put this in the nicest possible way? If you need to delay a game, it seems quite rare that it comes out as good as you hoped it would be before you had to delay it. And it is a little bit of a worry because obviously it has to come out eventually. I've spoken kind of tongue in cheek about the financial pressures me as a content creator will be under. Obviously, Sports Interactive, Sega are going to be under the same kind of financial pressures. It's very, very, very important in the world of video games to get them out before Christmas because that's the biggest sales period of the year. So if they have to delay this again, which fingers crossed they won't, that will then have knock-on effects further down the line. I remember, I think it was Championship Manager 4 years ago, ended up being delayed, didn't come out until April. And even when it came out then, it was a mess. My worry will be either this one gets delayed, and we're playing FM24 for another 6 months. Fingers crossed it's not that. But also, fingers crossed it's not rushed out to meet the financial pressures in an unfinished state because none of us want to play a buggy mess. So yeah, some genuine concerns about this that hopefully will be put to rest over the rest of this development blog and the rest of the stuff that we found out over the coming weeks and months. I mean, I think it's fair to be concerned at this stage. As I outlined in June's blog, we've consistently had ourselves accountable to the same 3 core questions. Would we do it the same way if we had our time again? Would we have done this at all? And do we have the time required to do this to the highest possible standard in our first cycle of a new era? I do like the fact that they're challenging every single element of the game with those 3 questions. I think that's a really good strategy. The challenges we've encountered in the development process over the last couple of months had led us to make another difficult decision around game content. International management will not be playable in FM25, FM25 console, or FM25 touch. I'm not sure I'm that bothered. I have not touched international management FM24. I barely touched it in 23. It doesn't really bother me. And I would prefer them to spend more time getting the rest of the game right. So on the face of it, I'm not that bothered by this as a decision. However, when you also factor in there's going to be no fantasy draft, no versus mode, and there's various other bits that are being removed from the game as well, we are definitely getting a very, very scaled back version of Football Manager for this launch version of FM25. But when you combine all those things together, is a worry? Unless it's brilliant. If it's brilliant, it's not a worry anymore. Coming off the back of a summer of tournament football, and with this week even being an international break, we've really looked hard at international management in FM and determined that what we were planning to deliver wouldn't reach our initial quality threshold. I guess reassuringly, that means they are planning on making international management actually good, which it hasn't ever really been in FM. So if we have to wait a year to get a version of it that actually works and is good, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We also considered the available game data. Only 5.6% of all FM24 PC saves have used the mode, which we feel validates our view that we need to do much, much better with the experience. Fair enough. And that number is even smaller on console, wowzers. So rather than delay FM25 even further, we've paused work on that area of the game and allocated those resources to other key areas. It will continue to exist in FM25 as part of the wider simulation of world football. It just won't be playable. Okay. I mean, they're owning it and they are focusing on the areas of the game that are more important. That's got to be a positive. However, international management will remain playable in FM25 mobile, as that's on a different development track and code base. For all other versions, international management will return in a much more feature-rich way, yes, to FM26 and console and touch, in what will be an exciting year for international football with the World Cup expanding to 48 teams. To be clear, this will return as part of the base game and not as any form of additional downloadable content. I know that was something people got very upset about in the June update when they thought they were going to have to go and buy Fantasy Draft as DLC because they announced it was going to, was it Fantasy Draft or Versus Mode? Something they talked about potentially dropping mid-year. And a few people got upset that it was going to be fantasy, it was going to be DLC. I don't think the plan is for any DLC to be chargeable, and they're making it very clear this time, which I can understand after the backlash they got last time. While difficult, these decisions are made for the good of the game and the majority of our players. We're determined to assure that FM25, the first game in a new engine, is as good as it can be in the time we have. By pushing back FM25's release date, we've given ourselves a few extra weeks of development time to try to deliver the best experience that we can for this first in the new era of Football Manager releases. And that is encouraging. I think I'd like to, having worked with Sports Interactive for close to 10 years now through multiple launches of the game, I am confident that they're not going to release a game that's not good enough. So I guess we just have to have it a little bit later. At least it gives me time to finish Wembley. I should finish Wembley now. In recent weeks, I've also taken steps to free up more of my time to focus solely on development and supporting the wider team. One of our core studio values is consider the bigger picture. And what's most important right now is focusing on FM25. I mentioned in June that I'd be speaking at the Unite conference in Barcelona as part of the keynote. While we'll still have an FM presence there, I'll not be making the trip because I need to concentrate all my efforts on directing FM25. It's for this reason that I will also not be attending Tokyo Game Show, an event I loved last year and really helped make our first ever release in Japan a big success. So all hands on deck by the sounds of it. I've also cancelled a trip to America that I was really looking forward to, but the game and you as the players of our games are the bigger picture. Kudos, Miles. Good work. An update to player profiles. When we begin our gameplay rollout, one of the areas I'm really looking forward to is sharing our work on women's football. As you know, it's been a long-term project for us and one of the biggest things we've done in recent times outside of the move to Unity. Throughout the process, we've been laser focused on introducing women's football to FM in the most authentic way possible. We've applied that thinking to everything we've done, as we generally do with all areas of design and development. From a gameplay perspective, being able to move seamlessly between managing men's and women's clubs and vice versa in one world, one ecosystem was the number one priority, but that's forced us to consider how various game world aspects are currently portrayed. As such, we can now share a change we've made to all FM25 player profiles. A player's weight will no longer be visible. Okay. They're going to explain why. Through the creation of our women's football database, we discovered that while the weight of male athletes can change a bit month to month, women's body types are very different from men's and their weight fluctuates a lot more, often weekly. This perspective encouraged us to review out the wider game, much like we have with all other areas, and we've ultimately decided to no longer show weight for any players in FM25. A very basic measurement will still be included under the hood, but it won't be visible on the front end anymore. It's going to be a little bit harder for me to pick out the big meaty boys. I'm going to miss my big meaty boys. But I completely understand the change. I imagine there'll be meatheads who don't understand the change. I completely understand the change. Testing update. We also announced in June that we'd be welcoming FMFC members within a reasonable travel vicinity to come to our campus in London and help with playtesting the new UI/UX of FM25. We received an enormous response to that, and I want to thank everyone who has volunteered and given us their availability. The playtesting will still be going ahead, but as a result of the above milestones moving, the start date is shifting slightly. FMFC members who have applied will be contacted shortly with further date options as we begin to finalise the process. This should be my last development update until we start focusing more on what's in FM25. We have lots of good stuff to show and we're excited about, but I want to reiterate that FM25 is the first instalment in a new era for the game, one that will give us a lot more possibilities than we had with the previous chapter. FM25 is just the starting point for what is a very exciting long-term project, and I completely agree with that final sentiment of that. I think we have to manage our expectations a little bit for FM25, and to be fair to Sports Interactive, they are doing that with these development updates. They are trying to temper expectations a little bit. I don't think we can expect a game that is as complete and as finished as recent versions of FM have been. Obviously, there's already a lot of features that have already been announced that are going to be removed, and it's a brand new game in a brand new engine. There probably will be a few bugs at launch, and as long as they're reacted to and fixed in reasonable time and with the right kind of like spirit and attitude behind it, and I guess we just kind of have to all pull together over the next few months, because ultimately we all want this game to be a success. Nobody wants the game to come out and be rubbish. Nobody wants the game to come out and be broken and not work and not get fixed. We all want the best possible version of FM25, and I think looking long term, this switch to Unity and everything that we've been told about it, everything we've learned about it, it should lead to a much better game down the line, which will have more features and stuff that works better, stuff that's had more thought put into it, stuff that works properly. No more aliens, hopefully. But in the short term, we are going to take a little bit of a hit to make that happen. Anyone who plays other strategy simulation games, Civilization's always the one that comes to mind for me on this one. You have the Civilization game cycle where you'll get your main game that releases every however many years. I think we've got Civilization 7 coming early next year, and Civilization 7, when it comes out, will not be nearly as complete and feature rich and polished and bug free as the final version of Civilization 6. And that's always the way through that game cycle. They release the main game and then they have these major like headline named updates that come out maybe once a year or so. after that main game, and there'll be other bits that drop here and there as well. And usually by the end of the game cycle, 3 or 4 years later, you have this really complete and awesome version of the game, and then they kind of wipe the slate clean, start again with a stripped back version of the game that is like a new blank canvas almost, that they can build the new game on top of, and then features start to come back that were in previous games, new features start to be applied, and we ultimately end up with a much better version than the one we had before. That's certainly always been my experience with that game, and I know it's the case for a lot of games that operate in a similar way. And I think we just have to kind of get our heads around FM, certainly for this cycle, try to think about it in that way. We've had 20 years of little improvements each year and never really resetting and starting again, which is why we've got ourselves into the pickle we're in with some stuff that just doesn't really work, because it's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and to fix things that might seem like small issues, like the aliens, you got to dig back down through so many layers of code and versions of the game that it just becomes impossible to figure out what's gone wrong and how to fix it. And it's just easier to wipe the slate clean and start again. But it does mean there's going to be less in the game, and I guess we have no choice but to be okay with that. I'm still excited for the new game. Fingers crossed I will be one of those lucky people who get contacted to go and play test the game soon. I would very much like to do that and have a proper little fiddle around with it and see how it's going to work. And we just have to be patient, I guess. End of November for the full game, I guess, means, like I say, early to mid-November for an early access, and it's just all a couple of weeks later than usual. Like I say, at least we'll get to finish Wembley. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Don't be a wang. This is not a place for wangs, but I am interested in your genuine thoughts and feedback. And if we get enough interesting points made, I might even make a follow-up video, because let's face it, I need to find a way to replace about 2 million views worth of YouTube content that I'm now losing because they've moved the release date. So if we can milk this as much as we can, believe me, it will get milked. In the meantime, watch this space. My OnlyFans will be starting soon, because goodness me, am I worried? I'm going to go and have a lie down. I'm very worried. Thanks for watching, folks.